Hi, everybody. This is John Forsland as Chuck Caton, the Hall of Fame radio voice of the Carolina Hurricanes. And you're watching the Power Play Break, the place to talk about pucks.
Audio's rolling in 3, 2, 1. Back here in the Power Play Break with Rick Peckham. Rick, okay, you win the Calder Cup that year, and how did you get yourself to the Hartford Whalers?
Well, I was in Rochester for another year, and at the end of that season, would have been the summer of '84, I got married, my wife Vicki, from Rochester, and we were settling in for a new year. Jim Schoenfeld was coming in as the new coach, and then an opportunity opened up with the Hartford Whalers. About a month before the season starts, I would say 2 weeks after I get married. So now all of a sudden we're moving to Hartford, and you know, that we were very excited about that. I had spent 7 years in the American League, and you know, for everyone in the American League, you're trying to get to the next level, and all of a sudden, when I least expected it, here comes this opportunity. So my wife and I moved to Hartford. We know no one there, and so it was a lot of fun though, because the Whalers organization was really welcoming, a great family. Howard Baldwin was the owner, and Bill Barnes, the late Bill Barnes, was the director of PR, and he was kind of the guy I worked for directly, and we had a great time, and a terrific bunch of players. Even though they didn't, you know, they were showing improvement that year, they'd had some dreadful seasons. They were starting to turn the corner because they had young guys like Ray Ferraro and Ulf Samuelsson and Paul McDermott and a few others that were coming on and coming into the NHL, and they were starting to come together.
Now, we always ask guys here who are players, you know, what was your first game like? Who called you to tell you were coming? So who called you to tell you were coming to Hartford, and what was your first game like for you in the NHL?
Well, it was Ron Ryan, actually, the Flyers executive, who was running Sports Channel New England at the time. And he had called me about coming up there. And I went up to interview in the Whalers offices. And as I'm sure many of your viewers have remembered or heard the stories of, the Hartford Civic Center was in a mall.
Yes, and now everyone's doing.
Exactly.
They were years ahead of their time on that.
Murray Craven later gets traded from the Flyers to the Whalers. He says, boys, I'm going to go play hockey at a shopping mall. So, I mean, that's how it was regarded by a lot of people at that point. So I park in the parking garage below the rink, go in the elevator. First guy I see, it's Gordie Howe. He's working for the team.
Oh, my gosh.
Howard had brought Gordie, Mark, and Marty, his sons.
When they merged.
Right, in the
79.
late years of the WHA. It brought them from Houston to Hartford, and Gordie actually played his final year in the NHL in 1979-80 and stayed with the team in a community relations role. And he was there most of the time, and you know, what an experience. So you bump into him in the elevator, go up for the interview, everything went well. Now we're moving to Hartford, and you know, your head's spinning, the season's starting in a couple of weeks. I'm not really there for any training camp, so I've got to really know and learn things on the fly. Don Blackburn was my first broadcast partner, and he was the Whalers coach their first year in the NHL, and also worked in the insurance business in the area after he got out of that, and so got into broadcasting. And my second year, actually my first two were with Blackie, and the second year the team made the playoffs. He surprised everybody, upset the Quebec Nordiques in a best-of-3 first-round series. And advanced to the second round against the Montreal Canadiens, who would eventually win with young Patrick Waugh in goal. And they went to double overtime of a seventh game, losing at the Montreal Forum. Very memorable game. They had so many chances to win that game in overtime. Ray Ferraro had a great chance. Yvon Corvo, I think, hit the crossbar in the second overtime or something like that. And Claude Lemieux won it. He was a rookie at the time.
I know.
I think he'd played 10 games in the league.
He got called up late in the season for that.
Yes, and beat Mike Liut over the shoulder for the winner, and it was a great season. And they were kind of off and running for a few years there, and from a hockey standpoint, it was great. They were very competitive, some terrific guys. They kept that group together. What was unique about Hartford was that, as you know a little bit about Connecticut, Chris, you know, it's a community. And
yeah,
so
John Forsland was on with us, and he talked about the community of Hartford.
Yes.
And how it's tight-knit, and the Whalers, everyone took a love to the Whalers. But you had guys like Ron Francis there.
Yes.
You had Sean Burke there. I mean, you had Pat Verbeek. You had talented guys coming through that organization.
Yeah, we really did. And I think that it's become more common knowledge now, the number of players who became coaches or managers in the National Hockey League off those teams from about a 2 and 3 year period. You have Dave Tippett, Joel Quenneville. I know I'm going to miss some. Ronnie Francis now, obviously, in upper management with Carolina. Kevin Dineen, who was the blood and guts player of that team.
Everyone loved him on that team.
Yeah, one of my most memorable games was when they played Montreal in the playoffs, and it was in that 7-game series, and he scores an overtime winning goal and just blows around Larry Robinson for the goal, and you'd have thought the roof blew off that place. You'd never heard that kind of noise at the Hartford Civic Center before. And it was just tremendous excitement in the community. And the fact that we had a PR guy named Phil Langan who was very community oriented. He had guys going to schools for appearances, a variety of things. If you lived in Connecticut in that period of time and you'd never met Ron Francis, you must have been living under a rock, because the guys were everywhere.
They were all over the place.
Yes.
I remember, John had said to us back then, so many guys would make appearances at the opening of like a pet store, or whatever.
Yep.
They really knew how to embrace the community. And I think that's why still today, there's such a hardcore group of people that love the Whalers. Just
Yes.
talk about the Whalers. There's websites out there. I mean, it's truly an amazing thing when you look at that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. In the summertime, a lot of those guys would stick around. They made great business contacts. Joel Quenneville was working for Legg Mason in the summers, and Dave Tippett was learning how to build homes, and Mike Liut was involved in business. Ronnie Francis got a great business background working with people they made contact with in that community. And in the summer, we'd play a series of softball games. We had a pretty good softball team, and Gordy would play on it. John Anderson was another guy who, of course, has coached in the NHL with Atlanta and was a big star on those teams. And he was part of it, and you had guys from the sales department, the players, broadcasters, all part of it, and you'd travel around the state and play these games and get great turnouts as they'd play the local police and fire departments or something like that. But it was that kind of approach, and when things started to go well, now people really rallied around him. And I think that, the period of time from 1986 to about 89 would have been the high point for that entire existence of the Whalers in Hartford.
Now, did you ever get a chance to, schmooze or hang with Gordy when he was around, or?
He would come to practice on a lot of days. So you'd sit in the stands and just talk hockey with Gordie Howe. I mean, you just don't.
Doesn't happen today.
Really,
no
it just doesn't.
Superstars really do that today.
And he's so approachable. Throughout his career, he's been such an easy guy to get to know and to just go say hello to, just a regular guy. And that's the way hockey players were at that point, and they still are to a large degree now. And Gordie was Mr. Hockey, and he was right there in your organization. You could see him in the office just about every day.
What was your highlight with the Whalers? What would you say was your greatest moment with them?
I would say that time period where the 85-86 team that upset Quebec, that was a huge upset at Le Colisée. The Nordiques had won the Adams Division, and they were getting all set to play the Canadiens, and the Whalers come in there and knock them off. And then that great series with Montreal, so many big moments. It was just so exciting, and the fact that it was my second year with the team and in the National Hockey League, to experience that and to go to places like the Montreal Forum, where this is playoff atmosphere right here. It just doesn't get any better than that. And Quebec, just a great atmosphere there. Going to Chicago Stadium at that point, the Boston Garden where I did my first game, and two memories from that was, one, I had a light gray suit on for my first game, and I was so nervous that I sweated right through the pit.
Oh my gosh.
And the second one, and this was just vintage Boston Garden, I'm coming out of the place, and I'm looking, and some cops have got some kid, looks like he's 21 years old, handcuffed, face down, throwing up on the concourse of the Boston Garden. That was pretty much what you had there. So those were my two memories of my first game. But nevertheless, all those great venues and seeing those great teams, it was so much fun.
Now, I talked to John Forsland about this. April 13th, 1997, the last Whalers home game. People know you now as the voice of the Tampa Bay Lightning, but as luck would have it in the schedule, that's going to be the last home game ever in the history of the Whalers. What emotions did you feel going into that game? I mean, you had been there, you had started your career there. It was, where you got your feet wet in the NHL. I mean, it must have been really upsetting to you to go in there to know that, it's not going to be, they're not going to be
It
here
was
next
just a bizarre feeling. You're kind of numb, and at the same time, you're seeing people who had worked for that organization since as long as I had been there, and before that, and they just knew the same thing, and they're just walking around like zombies because they knew it was all over. And I had rented a car because we still owned our house in Manchester at the time, and we were trying to sell it, so I was checking on the house. So when we got in there with the Lightning for that game, I rented a car, so I was taking the car back after the game, and I had the post-game show on. And Chuck Caton, he was holding back the tears in his final sign-off, and it really kind of hit me at that point. It really kind of choked me up because, so many people, and you talked about the fans who, to this day, care so deeply.
They're beloved up there. It's incredible. It's like the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Absolutely, and they're great people, and they just love hockey, and they fell in love with the Whalers and got to meet and see all these guys, and it's all moved on, and so you just felt so bad for them, and it was very surreal to be a part of that with the Lightning being there for the last game ever for the Whalers.
Now, as the game is progressing, are you thinking to yourself, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here. This is incredible. This is just, it's amazing, but at the same time, it's so awful. I feel so bad for what's going on.
Yeah, it's kind of building up. You can tell by the crowd reaction. It's building up toward the end of the game. I think Kevin Dineen scored the winning goal for the Whalers in that one. And it's just kind of building to an emotion that you just don't experience in a rink on a normal basis. And you got to be professional. You get through it. You've gotten through the game, and you've got to get through the telecast. And I'm certainly at that point. I'm a big part of the Lightning. I've got a great opportunity in Tampa. I've moved on, but at the same time, you're watching the end of this franchise, and they're going to move into some unknown situation, really, in Carolina, where they didn't even play in Raleigh the first 2 years. So you just kind of felt for a lot of people there.
When we get back, we'll talk about Rick's move to Tampa after this.